Kathleen, and today I'm talking about all my favorite standalone books. I've been meaning to make this video for quite a while, but for some reason never got around to it. Everything just kept getting interrupted, but I'm excited to be talking about these books today. I will note the majority of these books on this list are going to be contemporaries. That's my favorite genre. It's what I read the most of, and it's also the genre that has the most standalones in general. But without further ado and too much more rambling, I want to talk about all my favorite standalone books, so let's just get into it. So the first book I had to mention is actually one that is in my top 5 favorite books of all time, which is a video I will probably make at some point in the future, but that's I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This is a book I read about 3 years ago at the end of high school, and I cannot explain how much I love this book. It's about 2 twins, one named Noah, one named Jude, and the story follows Noah when he's about 13, 14, and then Jude when she's about 15, 16, and it follows what happened that made them go apart from each other and made them not so close anymore, and you figure out how they might be able to come back together. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and it's so hard to explain unless you've read it, but Jandy Nelson's writing style is just so incredible. Her writing makes you see color in ways you didn't know color could be seen. It's absolutely stunning. And it's also just a really quiet, beautiful story about family and relationships and what makes us fall apart in life. I really cannot say enough good things about this book. I love it with all my heart. There was a thread on Twitter recently that basically talked about books that made you hold it to your heart and squeal and made you so happy, and this is one of the only ones that's ever done that to me. It's a very special book, and it will always have a very special place in my heart. Next book I don't feel like I've mentioned in a little while, so good for me, but that's A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I used to talk about this all the time when I first started my channel, but I really haven't much recently, but I decided to get back into it because it's an amazing, amazing book. This follows a boy named Connor who's 12 years old and his mother has cancer, so there's a lot of built up emotional issues about that. And then one night a monster appears in his window and he tells Connor he's going to tell him 3 stories, and at the end of the 3rd night, Connor has to tell him his story and it has to be the truth. It's an incredibly poetic book. It's really, really heartbreaking. I saw the movie and I actually cried more at the movie than I did at the book. I didn't really cry at the book, but the movie's really sad. It's just such a beautiful story. It's perfect in ways I didn't know books could be perfect. It's an incredibly moving story. If you do ever pick it up, I highly recommend getting the illustrated version because look at the artwork. Like, it's just really, 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 really beautiful. Like, it has really, really beautiful art. It's done by Jim Kay, who does the illustrations for the Harry Potter books, so that's really great as well. It's one of those books I really love and I think is great for all ages. I know it's middle grade, but really you could read this from 12 to 87 and you'd be fine. It's a beautiful story. I highly, highly recommend it. I had to mention another book that I completely love. I read this for the Booktubeathon last year and it completely surpassed all my expectations in every way, and that is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. It follows a boy and girl who are 17 years old, Natasha and Daniel, and Natasha is about to be deported back to America. And Daniel is the son of Korean immigrants, and one day he sees her and he just suddenly falls in love with her, and the whole story takes place over the course of one day. Honestly, it makes you believe in insta-love in ways that I didn't even believe I could believe in insta-love. It's not that it's so realistic that people would fall in love in one day or anything like that, but there's just something about the magic of this story that really just sweeps you up in it. Nicola Yoon's writing is really beautiful, and it has this really cool plot device that I really, really enjoyed, where basically there's all these different characters, and those characters each get their own little chapter where it tells things from their perspectives and their lives, and it gives the idea that no one is really throwaway and everyone has a purpose in the story, which is really cool, and it just added so much to the depth of the story. It also tells those parts in 3rd person present tense, which has the effect of making you feel like there's some overarching narrator who is in control of the story and in control of Natasha and Daniel's fates, and there's not much they can do about it. I loved it. I don't have that much more to say about it. It's one of those books that is so diverse and just so amazing, and I highly, highly recommend picking it up. I'm gonna go on a bit of a Rainbow Rowell fest for a moment, but the first book I'm gonna mention is Fangirl. This is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I've loved it for a very, very long time, since I was in high school when I first read it. It's about a girl named Kath who goes to college and she's obsessed with writing fan fiction, isn't really ready to move on from that world, but her sister Ren completely is and starts partying, and there's a boy named Levi who Kath meets who she thinks is dating her roommate and she kind of likes, and blah blah blah. It's such a sweet story. Kath deals with day-to-day anxiety, which is something I've totally felt on a not everyday, like, consuming your life, but it is there and present. It also deals with mental illness with her father, and it talks a lot about sisterhood, which is something I really like. So yeah, I think this is a great book. If you want to check out a Rainbow Rowell book, then this is definitely a good one to start with. And then of course I had to mention the other Rainbow Rowell book that I really, really love. It was a total surprise for me as well, but that's Attachment. So this one is a completely different take. It's actually an adult novel and it's totally different from other books, but essentially it is about a man named Lincoln who is kind of like an IT guy at a newspaper in about the year 2000. But essentially what his job is he spies on office email and makes sure that people aren't like spamming and like like doing inappropriate things on the email. And in theory, when they do that, he's supposed to send warnings to them and tell them not to do it again. What happens is he starts reading these emails between these two friends who work at the office named Beth and Jen, and they have really, really funny, interesting conversations, and he starts to read it, and he slowly starts to fall in love with Beth. It's a little creepy, like he is a little bit stalkery, but overall, I just love this book so much. It's so heartwarming and happy. It gives me joy when I read it, and that's something I really seek in books. I know that I love to think and everything when I read a book, but I also love to feel joy, and this book makes me feel joy. It makes me so happy. So yeah, I love this book, and you should read it. The next book I want to talk about, I feel like people are gonna judge me for including on this list, not because of what the book is, though maybe that, but the fact that it technically shouldn't be here. So I wanted to talk about Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, which I know I can hear you asking that question. You're like, Kathleen, what are you doing? That book has 2 sequels. One of them just came out. I see that. I know that's true, but in my heart, it doesn't. So here's the thing. I read this book, and it was the first book that ever made me cry. I love this book. Like, I really do. It has a very special place in my heart. It will always, always bring me back to a certain time in my life. And so I wanted to include it on this list. And I know you're thinking, again, yeah, that's fine, but like, it has 2 sequels. Here's the thing. I never read the sequels because I heard the plot of the second one, and I thought, that is stupid. And the thing is, when you read this book, it doesn't need a sequel. Me Before You ends in a very complete way. There's really no reason for there to be another one. I didn't really want to read about what happened to anyone in it after it ended. Because in my heart, this is a standalone. So I treat it like a standalone, even though it's technically not one, but it is one of my favorite books, and I just consider it standalone, and then the other ones are just like companions or something, but this one is on its own for me. I love this book. I really do. It's heartbreaking in all the right ways. I don't feel like it plays with your emotions or anything like that or manipulates them, which I appreciate, and I just enjoyed it so much. It snuck up on me in ways I didn't expect, and I really ended up loving it. I wanted to give a quick shout out to an early favorite, and that's Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews. This is about a boy named Greg who is in his grade 12 year, and he pretty much doesn't really fit in with any particular group because he doesn't want to. He floats between all different groups, making sure he's still friendly with all of them, but never really being friends with any of them. The only person who's really his friend is his friend named Earl, and they make really, really bad films together that are super hilarious, until one day his mother tells him that his childhood friend Rachel has just gotten leukemia, and he should befriend her. You might be thinking is that this is a love story, but it's absolutely not. It's actually just a really funny book. The humor can be a little crude at times, but I really don't mind that at all. I just thought this was a hilarious book. It has such a funny voice, but it also kind of hurts you at the end a little bit in ways that you know is coming, but it still hurts because the book has been so funny up to this point. Greg's not a very good person, but he's kind of an understandable character, and I couldn't help but root for him in the end. So yeah, I think this is a really good book. I think it tends to get overlooked a lot, and I think it's pretty unpopular these days, but I still think it's fantastic. Even though I just read this pretty recently, I couldn't not mention the wonderful Nice Try Jane Sinner by Leanne Oak. Essentially what this story is, it's about a girl named Jane Sinner who has been kicked out of high school for reasons not explained right away in the text, and she decides to finish high school by enrolling in a local community college, and there she ends up signing up for a reality show run by students called House of Orange. That's basically a Big Brother style where they're going to go live in this house and it's going to be on YouTube, and they're going to do a bunch of challenges. It's going to be really funny. Jane, meanwhile, is dealing with loss of faith as she's recently stopped believing in God, and her parents don't really know that yet because they're devout Christians. It's such a funny book. I could not stop laughing. It's one of those books that, just like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, it made me laugh so hard when I read it. It made me just die laughing, honestly. It's so funny. Jane has such a sharp, sarcastic voice, but you also know she's covering up a little bit with that. It's her, but it's only a part of her, and she's not really letting you see all the other parts of her. I'm not going to go into it too much. I have a whole 5 reasons to read this book, and I'll link that down below. I've talked about it a lot, but needless to say, I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I highly recommend checking it out. And then you guys knew this was coming, but you should have expected it. It's Saints and Misfits by SKOE. This actually might be my 5th favorite book of all time. I'm not 100% sure, but it might be. This book is about a girl named Jana who has recently been sexually assaulted by a Muslim boy at her mosque, and everyone perceives that Muslim boy to be extremely holy, in part because he's memorized the Quran and he just seems to be a really, really great Muslim. Jana knows the truth, and she also just feels a bit like a misfit in her world. She loves Flannery O'Connor, she loves to read, she's a bit of an oddball, she has a crush on a Christian boy who's definitely not Muslim, and she doesn't really know where she fits in. This is one of those stories that didn't necessarily affirm my whole life, but it definitely affirmed a part of it. One thing what really meant a lot to me was Jonna being a religious character. I liked seeing a character of faith, a teenager of faith especially, which I think is rare, and it's something I experienced a lot as a teenager, and it's something I really had been looking for in a book, and I related a lot to that. Even though we weren't the same religion, that still meant a lot to me personally. It also really delves into Muslim culture and the religion in such a way that's so interesting. You learn so much about the faith, you learn so much about the culture, and there's so many amazing characters. There's a lot of awesome female friendships in this book, which I really love. I think it's a fantastic book. I want more people to read this book. It's so incredibly diverse and well written, and I think it's amazing, and I think it deserves more attention than it gets. And then I want to talk about The Truth Commission by Susan Juby, a book I do not actually have a physical copy of, hence the little insert here. So this book follows a girl named Normandy who goes to a school for the arts in British Columbia. For a project, she's working on a piece of narrative nonfiction, and that's kind of the premise of the story, is that's what she's writing and that's what you're reading. It's written in diary format with footnotes and stuff, so it's super fun. Normandy has a sister who got really famous in the past year for being a graphic novelist, and what her sister does is she essentially takes stories from their life, from her family, and she writes them into her graphic novels, but she twists things and she exaggerates them and she changes them and she changes perspectives on people. As well, meanwhile, Normandy and her friends establish something at school called the Truth Commission, where the basic premises are going to go up to people and ask them for their truth. I really cannot stress how many more people I want to read this book. This is one of those books that I think does the whole lighthearted and making you think things so well. It is the perfect combination of those two things. It's funny and quirky, but at the same time asks you so many questions about truth and what it means to have truth and who gets to tell our stories, and I think that is something that resonated with me so deeply. It was like nothing I'd ever read before, to be quite honest. I really, really adore this book. It's fantastic. Yes, it's a Canadian book, but that's not the only reason I wanted to mention it. It's just so good. I think it deserves so much attention. It's amazing. It won a couple of different literary prizes here in Canada. It's just a wonderful book. I think Susie Juby is a great writer. I think she's someone to look out for. So yeah, I think it's amazing, and I definitely want more people to be checking it out. I wanted to talk about a book I really, really love. I read it last year, and it's History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. This book follows a boy named Griffin, whose ex-boyfriend Theo has recently died in a drowning accident, and he always believed that he and Theo would get back together and they would be endgame, but recently he's realized that's not going to happen, and the only person who's really able to comfort him at that time is Theo's new boyfriend, Jackson. This is a really, really sad story, but also uplifting. Adam Silvera has a way of combining humor with heartbreakingness that works so well. There's a lot of diversity in this story, and honestly, the book is so much about the secrets that Griffin is keeping and the lies he's telling, and that's really the heart of the book and what really gets to you. It's fantastic. I listened to the audiobook, which I actually love, and I highly recommend the audiobook. I love audiobooks in general, but I do really suggest it. The narrator was really good. I think it's one of those books that definitely should be read by everybody. It's a fantastic book, and I really can't recommend it enough. And then next, I could not bring this book up, Boy Meets Boy by David Levithan. This is a super, super sweet book. It's another one of those ones that honestly just makes me so happy to read. It's a really simple story about this boy named Noah who's gay, and he lives in this like super accepting town, and Paul, who is actually the main character, not Noah, meets a boy named Noah who he starts to develop a crush on, and it's basically just a boy meets boy, boy gets together with boy, boy loses boy, boy gets boy back type story. It's super cute. I really can't recommend it enough. It was one of those things that made me love David Levithan's writing. I think it's great. I highly suggest it, and yeah, I really like it. I like it more than anything else he's ever written, to be honest. And I just quickly wanted to get into a few honorable mentions because I feel like this video is insanely long, but I wanted to give a couple quick mentions to both The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli and Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. Essentially, these are just happy books. Again, they just make me smile and give me joy when I read them. I'm just so excited when I read them. I put a big smile on my face whenever Becky Albertalli writes anything. So yeah, I think her books are great. They're super fun. I really enjoy them. I don't know if they're my #1 favorite books of all time, but they do make me really happy, and for that reason, I always suggest people read them. And then I wanted to do a quick shout out to The Hate You Gave by Angie Thomas. I'm sure most of you know what this is about by now, but it's a story inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. It's about a girl named Star whose best friend Khalil gets shot in a car when they're going from a party by a police officer. And Star is basically caught in the aftermath of that and has to deal with the repercussions of what happens that night. It's a really great book. It's so inspiring and it makes you think so much, and it's so important and relevant, and it's just really good. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. I'm sure you have by now because it's so popular, but it's really a fantastic book. I wanted to give a quick shout out to my beat up version of The Kite Runner, which is a really, really beautiful story. This is about a boy named Amir who grows up in Afghanistan, and he witnesses a horrible thing to happen to one of his best friends, but he doesn't tell anyone what happened, and he doesn't intervene to stop the thing from happening, and he carries this guilt with him for the rest of his life. His dad eventually moves him to America, but he has to leave his friend behind, and he doesn't find out what happens to him for a very long time. One of the key lines in this first book is his friend saying that there is a way to be good again, and this book is all about Amir learning to be good again and learning to be a better person and learning to forgive and become someone worthy of forgiveness. It's a story I didn't expect. I was assigned it for school in high school, so I wasn't really thinking much of it, but I loved it. I thought it was just such a good story. It really does break your heart in a lot of ways, and it's just a great book. Yeah, I really suggest you read it. It's one of my favorite adult contemporary books. So that about covers it as far as my favorite standalones go. I will probably make more videos in the style of like my favorite X thing in the near future. If you guys did enjoy this video, let me know what you think of these books. If they're any of your favorites, if you hate them, let me know that as well. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on your way out if you're new here. I upload videos generally Tuesdays and Fridays, but at least twice a week regardless after this little hiatus I've had. If you'd like to follow me on any of my social medias, links will all be in the description. But in the meantime, I will see you guys next time.